the absence of no more questions from our readers and our subscribers and our valued customers here, we'll finish up with this one. I kind of, when we do these, especially for subscribers, I'd like to open the curtain a little bit. And I want to address something with you that happened to your teammate, Ben Kuzma, at the season end press conference. So just a little bit about your job and about the process and about covering the team. I certainly got my share of complaints about a question Ben asked, as did our editor-in-chief, Harold Monroe. So Ben asked Brock Besser if his personal situation with his father's illness impacted his performance. And Brock got very upset, very emotional, had to steady himself. And there was a ton of criticism of Ben. How dare you ask that? How dare you upset him? And it certainly bothered me as a journalist, and that there was this reaction. And I think it's because everything is so open now. You guys used to go in the locker room, whether there's a press conference or not, you would ask your questions, there would be a reaction. So be it. It's now that people are watching this uncomfortable moment. They're hearing you ask a question. They're like, oh, poor Brock. What do you Brock Besser has been very open about his father's illness and about what it means to him. He is a guy who has had a lot of those issues in his life where he's stepped up for other people, and he's been very honest about that. And of course, it's showing the human side of it. My answer to people was, I am going to trust Ben's relationship with that player to know that he's not crossing the line. And I've also raised past examples of when Peter Zezel was traded away when his niece was in town and dying, and so he ended up retiring. Ed Jovanovski pointing to the sky after one of his children had died, and being asked about it afterwards and being very emotional. Alex Burrows being asked several times and being brought to the verge of tears about Luc Bourdon. Like, these are human people, and you guys know when you cover them where those lines and where those boundaries are and what your relationship with those people is. So how did you see the criticism of Ben for asking that question, and how would you answer people who say, you're a jerk, how did you ask that, this is just clickbait?
Well, I mean, in many ways, it comes with the territory no matter what happens, unfortunately. But I think that I would simply point to the response that Besser had. He answered the question. And I would also point to what his agent Ben Hankinson said in the days following. That there was certainly no upset. I mean, he was physically, let me be clear here, he was physically upset. We understand that. We can understand why. But it was about thinking about his father. It wasn't about the question. And he made an effort to hold himself together. And if he had held himself together and answered the question, we're not talking about this. I pointed back to a similar. I mean, his father is obviously in a very difficult place now. But three summers ago, his father almost died, and then so Besser, that was Besser's offseason. He was looking to sign a new contract. He finally signed a new contract at his first media availability. After he signed his new contract, we discussed his father's illness, and he was asked in that moment by Farhan Lalji, essentially in similar terms. How difficult was things with your father? And in that moment, Besser had a hard time again. He held it together, though. That was the difference. And so nobody reacted in that time. How could you ask him about your dad? I mean, it was an ongoing thing that we were tracking. And like I said, we don't cheer for the teams, but there are people that you do cheer for. In that, because they're human beings, right? And so there is absolutely a trust factor there. And no one took issue with it. I mean, I had a run-in with that where people were upset about how I asked a question to Troy Stetcher during the 2020 playoffs. I mean, it was obviously a much lesser topic. I was simply asked him about whether he thought about the importance of this game potentially being his last game as a Canuck. And in the moment, he didn't want to talk about it. He waved the question away, which was his right. I didn't take an issue with it. It was a difficult moment. We only had access on Zoom. I hadn't had a chance to talk to him otherwise, and so that's where we were at. But but that's where it comes to. And in the end, I've talked to Troy since, and Troy didn't take issue with it. He said it was a good question. He said the contract sucked, but I don't know what else you were going to do about that. So, that's kind of where we're at. And the truth is, you're right. I mean, in another day, another way. I mean, this is how things go at the end of the season. That everything's on camera, and sure, it would have been easier if we'd had access to the room and we'd been able to talk to him about it in the days preceding. But here we are, and I don't think there's a single person that's come out of this saying, "I wish I didn't know more about Brock Besser." I think every single person in the end is like, I'm glad we have a better sense of what he's been dealing with, and it gives people a chance to actually support a player that they care about and show their sort of personal. It adds to their personal understanding of their own fandom.